Welcome to the Big Time Strength Podcast, featuring small school strength coaches making the big time where they're at. I am your host, Gage Rozier. Today's episode is sponsored by TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr provides strength conditioning software to athletics programs around the country. Whether you write your own programs or want access to over 100 templates, TeamBuildr can make your program more efficient, more accountable, and smarter when it comes to measuring your team's effort in the weight room. Visit their website and start a 14-day free trial at TeamBuildr.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hey guys, this week I am joined by Coach Erik Hoium, the Director of Strength Conditioning at Central Washington University. Coach has a great episode for us here today. He's doing it big time there at Central Washington. You can tell just from his voice that he's passionate, he's eager to learn, he's improving stuff there daily. He's got a great staff, it sounds like, and he's individualizing stuff for his kids and truly making it big time there at Central Washington. So really appreciate Coach coming on and spending time with us today. I took 2 to 3 pages of notes on this one, so I hope you get a lot out of it as well. Before we get to the episode, just a reminder, if you sign up for a TeamBuildr trial right now, then use the promo code BIGTIME, all in capital letters. You receive some complimentary templates, an in-season and off-season football program, a general athlete development program, and a Gameday CNS Prep Session. Really appreciate the guys from TeamBuildr sponsoring us. They do a lot for the industry, and I couldn't recommend their product enough. So thanks for TeamBuildr. All right, guys, let's get to this episode. Coach Erik Hoium, appreciate it. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Coach Hoium, I really appreciate you coming on the Big Time Strength Podcast. Get us going here by giving us a background of your journey through strength conditioning and where you're at right now.
Yeah, so Erik Hoium, I'm the Director of Strength and Conditioning here at Central Washington University. Probably a little bit different than most people you've had on the podcast in terms of background. I did start out as a graduate assistant football coach, and in that role, I was an assistant strength coach for the football team, which basically was just I got to be the guy that showed up at 5 a.m. to run the sessions every morning. That was at Olivet, Nazarene University out there at Bourbonnais, Illinois. Did that for a year and then actually moved back to Washington, got a football-only graduate assistantship here at Central. Did that for 2 years. Ended up volunteering for another year here just as a football coach. Didn't have any hand in the strength and conditioning stuff, nothing in the weight room. And then partway through that fall as a volunteer, our strength coach here at Central, who was, he actually, Jason Dudley, he's at Washington State right now. He was the very first strength coach, full-time strength coach here at Central. He got that position over there at Wazoo. And just being in-house, keeping my CSCS up to date, they asked me if I would take over in an interim role to kind of be the stopgap there for a little bit. So did that, and then they opened the whole deal up nationally and did a national search and was lucky enough to convince everybody in the building I was good enough to keep the job. So I've been doing that since, I guess, middle of the fall 2016.
Awesome. And then what are some of those things you think when you're in that interim role, what are some of the things you did that really proved to administration and the sport coaches that you were ready to be the guy and that they didn't need to bring anybody else in?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you take over in the middle of fall, the middle of a season, regardless of, whether that's the off season for your spring teams or preseason for your winter teams, in season for fall teams. It's difficult, and the last thing you want to do, especially for those in-season teams, is change stuff right away. It was a little bit challenging to run someone else's programming and uphold someone else's culture for sure. But we got that done in the first fall, and I think that showed them my ability to coach a little bit more than anything, that, hey, at the very least, this guy can come in and be in charge of a room and get things done in that way. But as we transitioned into the winter, one thing that I think I carried over from my experience coaching football and just learning from different guys I had been on staff with there is I had to sit down with every coach, every head coach, and say, what do you want? What's lacking? what do you want to see done? What can I change? You know, it was an opportunity for a fresh start for them. So if there were slight changes they wanted made, we could get that done. And then make sure they knew what my vision was for the culture in the weight room, what my vision was for what we were going to get done from a work standpoint. And I think establishing those relationships right away and empowering them in their own programs. You know, one of the things I say to all of our coaches is, at the end of the day, like, y'all, your job is the one that rides on win and losses. Like, you know, you guys go for the year. I'm not the one that's looking for a new job. It's going to end up being them. So they need to have a big say in what we do. And, you know, that might not necessarily be the quote unquote X's and O's, the science, the reps and sets. It more times than not, it's just the culture and core values and hammering home, you know, things from that aspect. But I think establishing those relationships and making sure they knew that I saw myself as an assistant on their staff, not as the big dog that was in charge of the weight room. You know, I was an assistant for them, and I wanted to get wins just like they did. I think probably went the farthest more than anything. You know, obviously you need to show that you're competent. You have an idea of what the heck's going on. You're not just programming 3 sets of 10
right,
all day, every day. But, you know, people are your greatest resource, and understanding that and building relationships right off the bat, I think, was the biggest.
Yeah, such a great strategy, and there's a lot of good stuff there. So talk a little bit about what is the culture of your program. You know, what have you tried to establish as the culture as you took over?
Yeah. You know, it's kind of a nuanced question in that I don't think there's. Yes, we have core values. Yes, we have a philosophy, and you put that online. That's your stamp. You're going to read that to the athletes day one and make sure they're on board with that. But you know, the culture is going to change with each group that's in the weight room. Work ethic, no question, is something that's going to get pushed. It's going to be an environment that they're going to get challenged every single day, and we hammer that home. Discipline is very important in what we do. Having fun, working hard, you know, making hard work fun is something that we try to push onto all of our athletes. But the culture is a little bit different with our women's basketball team than it is with our men's rugby team. It's different with our women's rugby team than it is with our football team. And I think that's where I lean more on my experience as a sport coach than I do my experience as a strength and conditioning coach, in that you got to feel those things out. And, you know, kind of alluding back to those conversations with head coaches, I try to have those on a weekly basis at the very least. You know, where are we at? How are the kids feeling? How are they physically? Where are we mentally? Where do they need to be pushed? Do they need to be challenged? You know, do I need to change something and make something difficult for them? Not necessarily physically difficult, but, you know, there are times when I give very little instruction and expect them to operate at a very high level. And that's because the head coach says we're having trouble, you know, being self-starters or problem solvers. So we try to find ways to get that done in there. So, yeah, as far as, you know, an overall culture, work ethic, challenging kids every single day, having a standard of operation is really, really important. And I think the umbrella term we use probably more than anything is going to be operate like a champion. You want to be a champion, you know, you want to get the ring, you want to be able to say that you're a champion in your sport, you got to operate like one every single day. Those championships end up being a byproduct of who you are. You know, there's what's the cliche saying? I think it's a military term. I think I even listened to one of your podcasts before of someone that used it. How you do anything is how you do everything. Big on that. Absolutely big on that. So if you want to be a champion, operate like one. Another one that, you know, a coach that I worked with here at Central that now is at Stephen F. Austin as a defensive coordinator, Scott Power, he uses the old Navy SEAL saying quite a bit that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. And if we don't have that mindset every day in the weight room, we're failing then. You know, this is where you have to catch yourself being being average, being mediocre, coasting through whatever the lift is, going through the motions. You got to catch yourselves in those and push. And we try to create an environment that's going to challenge that every day.
No, I love it. And one of the big taglines of this podcast and show is, make the big time where you're at. So what is maybe a unique way that you make the big time where you're at there at Central Washington?
Yeah, first of all, I love the make the big time where you're at saying. So I played football at Pacific Lutheran University. I played for Scott Westring, his father, Frosty Westring. Kind of coined that phrase back when he was coaching. That was a big thing in that EMAL football program. So that's something I've actually have had hammered into my head since back in 2009. So kudos to you on that, because that's awesome. I think everyone can gain a lot from applying that to their lives. But as far as ways that we get that done, the big time, Frosty would always say, big time's not a place, it's a state of your heart. If you want to be big time, then be big time. You have to operate in that manner. We don't. The big schools, they're doing this, or how come we don't have training table? Like, that's an easy one. Try to limit the talk on that stuff, because I think it encourages athletes to look at what they don't have versus what they do. And right now we have full control over a 1,500 square foot facility. We share an additional, I think, 1,200 square foot facility with PE for half the day. We've got 8 racks, 12 platforms, 12 barbells that we can use. We got a field house that we can sneak into that's covered. Like, we got enough to get the job done. We even have a deal with Dairy Gold right now, where they're sponsoring us and giving every athlete that comes out of the weight room, they get a little 8-ounce chocolate milk for a post-lift recovery drink. Like, that's little stuff like that is big time, and to act like it's not is ludicrous. Right. So if you want to be big time where you're at, you got to believe that you are. As far as unique things that we do, utilizing the resources that you have, I think goes a really long way. At the end of the day, resources is what separates the small schools from the big schools. It's money, it's facilities, it's resources. It's, people that you have. So maximizing the people in your building, maximizing their talents, I think is huge. I have 2 graduate assistants that work with me, and kind of taking the leash off them and letting them go. They have great experience. They've had great internships. One of my guys was at TCU for an internship, another one at University of Washington. So they've been there, they've seen some of that stuff, and they got experience. So we've put together some, on our quote-unquote off days for our athletes, those tweener days, typically Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have some mobility sessions where we just open the weight room up. Anybody that doesn't have class in this window, come in, and we're going to challenge the way you move. We're going to make sure hips, ankles, all that stuff, shoulders, we're going to make sure that you are, it's all prehab type movements, but we're going to make sure we're getting a little more individualized in that way. And I think athletes see that as a really big deal. It helps in recruiting for sure, but that's what big time schools are doing. So doing that, we have different protocols for different teams in terms of warm up, or we actually call them pre and post lift packages. We've maximized the people in our buildings. I don't know if talents or knowledge base is the best way to say it, but sitting down with our athletic training room, there's three or four full-timers in there. There's another 4 graduate assistants right now that all have internship experience, and just saying, hey, knees, prehab, go. Rehab stuff is their deal. Kid gets injured, athlete gets injured, that's their world. But how can we minimize some of these injuries? So if it's a knee issue, what can I do every single day with this group? What can I do every single day with that group? and just taking 2-3 movements that every one of those 8 people says is an everyday type, an EDD for the coaches, an everyday drill type deal. And we put those together. I've also reached out to other strength coaches and PT, AT colleagues that I have, and we've put together different packages based on what we're going to be doing in the weight room that we give to the athletes. They're going to get hip mobility, shoulder mobility, and ankle mobility, and we're going to hammer those out before they lift every single day. Those are going to change based on the actual lift that they're doing, obviously, but also on sport. Different sports have different demands. So our volleyball, their pre-lift and post-lift packages are completely different than our football players, and our quarterbacks are going to be a lot more similar to our volleyball athletes or our baseball athletes, those type athletes. So that sort of individualization on a smaller scale probably than the bigger schools do it, but I think athletes really buy into that, and they see that, okay, this coach knows what my workload is. They know what I'm being asked to do every single day, and they've designed something that is 100%. I think that's big time. And maybe it's not for some other schools, but our athletes have bought into it, and I think we're starting to see data now that it's keeping them on the field longer, which has been huge. So that's probably the biggest one. I think, when I sit in front of recruits and parents on the weekends, that's one that we point to that we think is unique to us.
I love that, and I think their generation sessions too on the off days just shows to your athletes how important you guys value recovery, that we have designated times that we're going to put in extra work, that you can come in and we're going to put you through it, and that's how much we value it. We're not just telling you recovery is important. We want you to do it, so come in and do it during this open time where we could be doing other things. We're going to block this time to come make your recovery a priority. I think that's
Exactly.
awesome. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a third of the equation,
yeah.
Right? So many like, Coach, I want to grind, I want to work. Okay, that's awesome, but you got to understand that the adaptation comes when you're resting, when you're sleeping, when you're recovering, and if we can work to minimize those recovery times. If I can get you fresh to work, in 2 days or the next day, really, really hard, then you start multiplying that. We're going to be able to do more work in a week. You multiply that over 52 weeks, that ends up being a lot more work, and your body's going to change a ton. But that's probably where we do the most lip service, honestly, is trying to convince these athletes in this, I need to grind and I need to put it on Instagram culture that we have, that, hey, like, nah, man, you need to sleep. You need to go home and get 9 hours. Like, that's what's going to be the best for you. Recover. Wake up, come in here. We'll get a nice little glisten going on the forehead. We'll get you warmed up and get you moving, make sure hips and knees and ankles and all that stuff feels good. And then the next day we'll bring you in and we'll go again. We'll crank that thing up. But yeah, just hammering that home. It's a third of the equation.
It's funny you mentioned the grind. It's funny you mentioned the grind, because I just had this talk with our guys. It's like the grind, and this comes from the Focus 3 podcast guys, if you ever listen to them. But, the grind is just like the ticket to the game. Everybody's doing what you just did in the weight room that you're post on Instagram for. That it's not a separating factor. So what is, and that's, not everybody grinds in how they sleep. Are they getting 8 hours, or grinding in the cafeteria, eating right, or doing all these recovery modalities? So no, I love what you're doing there, Coach. And within that, you mentioned leaning on your staff and using your people. So tell us a little bit about how you manage those GAs. I mean, we talked a little bit before we started recording, and you got a pretty good system going on. So let our listeners know a little bit about how you manage and evaluate your staff.
Yeah, it's we feel like it's been successful. Granted, it's only been a couple of years now that we're doing it, but so I have 2 graduate assistants that work with me, and they're here all day, every day, essentially. The first year GA, what we've done is break it into thirds, the 3 quarters essentially. where I'm going to take that first year GA and he or she's going to live in my hip pocket. Going to take that first quarter where they're just kind of learning. Obviously, I'm getting to know who they are, and they're getting to know me. You know, you try to do that as much as you can in the interview process, but it's still going to take some time. So that first year, that first quarter, that fall, you know, they're doing basic graduate assistant or even intern work. You know, they're setting the place up. They're writing the lifts on the boards. They're making sure, you know, everybody's on task and doing what they want, but there's very little, you know, there's going to be some coaching, but there's no programming. They're not really in charge of anything other than basic day-to-day operations. As we start getting into winter, I will then give them a team. And we so far, we've kind of felt out which team that's going to be of our 13 varsity teams that we have. 2 years ago, it was our women's rugby team. I think this next winter, it's going to be one of our track groups that we're going to give to our first year GA. But I will give them that team. As far as that team is concerned, that is now their head strength coach. That GA is in charge. He's the dude now. He's running day-to-day operations. I will program for that team. You know, at the end of the day, I've only worked with that assistant for 4 or 5 months. So we still need to make sure that philosophically we're on the same page or in the same ballpark at the very least. It gives me a chance to kind of vet it out and a few more months to have those conversations with them. Plus, I get to then program for my winter teams with them in-house. And I can have that GA sitting behind me as I'm working in Excel on the skeleton of their program and talk things out, let them ask questions and explain stuff, which is great for them. But honestly, I probably get more out of it because it forces me to actually validate the stuff I'm doing and what I'm thinking. So we'll do that in the winter quarter where they're in charge, but they're running my program. It also gives them a chance to just focus on the actual coaching itself. You know, managing a room, managing personalities in a room, making adaptations for injuries or adaptations to a list that maybe when I was programming for it in my office, I didn't think about the fact that I superset 2 barbell exercises together and we don't have enough barbells to do that type deal. You know, let them manage that sort of stuff while I do the programming. And then in the spring quarter, I'll give it completely to them. They get to program, they get to run it. That, as far as I'm concerned, that's their team. Obviously, I'm around, I'm in and out of the weight room, but really in the spring, I try to stay away from that hour session that team and that first year GA is in the weight room as much as I can and just give them the reins and say, go, you know, sink or swim type deal. As we transition then into the second year GA with that graduate assistant, then they will take over all the spring sports. That was kind of the standard when I took over, is that there was a split with the spring sports. The last strength coach before me, he actually split those up a little bit different, but I didn't want to change too much and it made sense. So now our second year GA takes over I think 6 spring sports that we have. Depending on how you break up track. You know, track is 2 sports of men and women's, but it ends up being 18 different groups, it feels like. But the second year GA will run all the spring sports. So, you know, baseball, softball, all the track groups. Right now, my second year GA is actually still running women's rugby because he's done a great job and they wanted it. So absolutely, go for it. And obviously, we'll ask that second year GA to be around as much as they want to, but, you know, I tell them going into that summer leading up to that second year that, hey, I see you as a full-time assistant. I see you as the associate head as far as I'm concerned. So operate like it. Operate like a full-timer. Operate like a professional. You're not a GA anymore. Those teams are your teams. So those one-on-one meetings weekly with head coaches, that's his or her deal. You know, if there's an issue with a spring sport athlete, that's his deal. If there's an issue that we need to sit down with the coach and talk about an athlete or talk about, hey, you're going hard in practice, like we need to know when those days are so we can manipulate some stuff in the weight room one way or the other, you know, whatever might come up, that's that's his or her deal. I'm not messing with it. If I need to step in, obviously I'm in the building and I can. But I try to treat them like a full-timer, like the head of that half of our groups as much as possible. And it's been really successful so far. You know, I might just be, like we were talking earlier, I might just be lucky that I have two really good people that work for me. But so far the system seems to be going great. I think we've developed that second-year GA well, and the first year they get really good experience, and makes sense. At the end of the day, it makes sense in my mind, and I can sleep at night, so I'm cool with it.
No, it makes total sense, and I think it's a great way, like you just said, developing the coach and making sure that you're not just throwing a guy in there that doesn't know what he's doing, then the athletes don't get a quality program, and then you're doing more work on the back end, and I think it's a great way to do it, Coach, and I appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the hurdles you've had to overcome there. You know, as a small school strength coach, there's plenty of challenges, just like there would be in a big school as well. But what are some of those toughest challenges you've had to overcome there so far?
You know, the biggest one, and it's probably not any different for other coaches that are sharing a facility, but scheduling is a nightmare. Right now we don't really do like an open hour type deal, which we've kind of messed around with the idea of just opening it up and letting athletes either in season or out of season come in whenever they can throughout their day. Right now we do lift as a team, every single team. So that ends up being, 16 teams at an hour each, and how we break up the weight room. It's a lot of hours that we got to spend in the weight room with these kids. And we don't have full control over the weight room every day. We have full control over half of it for most days, but in terms of PE classes having priority, cleaning of the facility having priority here, that's been kind of the biggest issue. And what I have learned over the last couple of years is it's way easier for me to go sit down into a coach's office and explain to them why I need their group to lift at a certain time than it is to send an email and hope that they get it, if that makes sense. Because that's another issue is we have some coaches here that have been here for a long time, 20 plus years, and not just that, but they've been stinking successful. Our volleyball teams, they've made a playoff run 7 years in a row. You try to convince that coach to do something different until you take a hike. Now, he's awesome. He wouldn't actually.
Right.
He'll sit down and have a conversation with me and explain why they're good for a reason, and his leadership his whole staff is the reason why. But I think you get what I'm saying, where a lot of these coaches have been doing this at a high level for a really long time. You try to convince them, hey, you've been an afternoon lift team. I need you to be a morning lift team. They're going to look at you with wide eyes saying, okay, justify that. So having those conversations in person, obviously thinking them out on the front end, but having those conversations in person is a way better way to do it than sending an email and saying, hey, can you do this? Because more times than not, you're getting an email back that says negative. We will not do that, and we will keep our afternoon time. So the scheduling's been really difficult, but like I said, go sit down with those coaches. You have a plan. Make sure it all makes sense, and explain to them that everything fits together in a specific way, and a small sacrifice for them, 30 minutes here earlier, or maybe not lifting right after practice because this is a group that they can't handle it. They just went all out on the floor trying to earn a spot at practice, and now they're coming into the weight room and they're gassed, and we don't get quality work at all. We can't load them because they're fatigued and their quality of movement is trash at this point. And now, we're having to limit a lot of what we do. We're not maximizing that time. So having those conversations with the people themselves, I think is huge in terms of scheduling. But no question, scheduling is difficult. Resources, just like everybody else. I probably have a better budget in the grand scheme of things than most people because I have a budget.
Right.
I know there's a lot of strength coaches out there that just flat out don't, but in terms of that stuff, I just stay diligent on finding deals. I think I went nuts on Black Friday and made the majority of the stuff that I was trying to purchase this year, whether it's slam balls or barbells or we just got a bunch of little balance discs. Bought all those on Black because it ended up saving us, 50% of what I was planning on spending, what I got budgeted, what I had on that line. So, finding those deals, I stay up on all the different websites. They send you catalogs and stuff. I just kind of make a note to have a little tab on my web browser for those websites, try to check them once a week to see if they have some special deal. I waited to buy barbells until that, I don't remember what company we bought from. Oh, American Barbell. I waited until they were doing free shipping. I just caught them on a random free shipping thing, and that ended up saving us like $300-400.
Yeah, it's huge.
Those things are heavy. So just find. I think there's ways. There's ways to pinch a penny and save a bunch. Before coaches come to me and ask if we wanted Vertimaxes, and awesome, it's sexy, that thing looks cool, and we can hook you up and we can do all this different stuff, but that's also an expensive piece, and we need 4 of them, 5 of them in order to get actual use with a team in an efficient amount of time. I cannot stand athletes standing around doing nothing. So 1 or 2 isn't going to do us any good. So instead of that, we bought hex bars and different bands and tubes. And we can do weighted jumps, and they can drop those things. We have chains now. We went and got chains so we can have some accommodating resistance there. Finding cheaper ways to get it done. Those things ended up costing us the total setup to get everything, just about, obviously, everything you can get done with the Vertimax ends up $100 a unit instead of $5,000 or whatever those things are. So there's ways. It's just staying diligent and paying attention, I guess.
I think there's another way that you're making the big time where you're at. That those are great things to have that maybe other schools could do, but let's find a different way. And I think that's awesome. I think just a great message to leave with is there's always a way. You just got to be creative and find it. So what are some things that you're excited about learning and improving on in the next year as a coach?
Yeah, I guess the great segue. I just mentioned the chains that we got. We've been using those a ton, and I'm a real big believer in accommodating resistance. I like chains better than I do hooking up bands. I don't like bands. In terms of squatting or benching with a band one way or another, there's too much that's needed. You need specific racks, and frankly, we don't have the right racks to do it. So we use chains quite a bit, and at first I got the chains because I believed it would help us in our squat progression in terms of just teaching the movement. I can have the load be lighter when they're down in a quote unquote more dangerous position. When they're more vulnerable at the bottom of a squat, there's going to be less load on them. As they start to progress up in the movement, obviously it gets heavier and heavier. That seemed like it made sense in terms of teaching, especially when we're kind of doing our 101 or our first month there in the fall. I guess a lot of teams, it ends up being the entire fall where we're teaching, but the chains made sense in that way. And I've fallen in love with that. We're 4 or 5 months into doing it, and I'm all in on those. I don't think I will ever change from using chains, but it has brought up, the idea of velocity-based training. And I know that's another thing that a lot of the big-time schools are doing, and having ways to measure those. Right now, we don't have the budget to get that done, to get those things purchased and really be able to measure them. But with accommodating resistance movements, I think you can focus on bar speed and that's what we started to do now, especially with our bigger athletes. You know, I'm always a little hesitant when I have think of big offensive linemen. You know, I've got a 300-pound guy that's a 600-pound squat or thereabouts. You know, I don't want to put 500 pounds on his back every single week. And if I do, and we load him up and I get him 2% stronger, right? I get him from a 600-pound squat to a whatever, 605, 610. How much better of an athlete is he going to be versus finding a way to only have to put 400-ish pounds on his back and get him to move that really, really fast, right? And doing it in a way where I can limit some of the eccentric movement or eccentric portions of the movement in there. That's what I'm really interested in. So, you know, we've been kind of as an office, that's been one of our deals, velocity-based training, and then impact of sleep also is kind of our professional development deal that we're doing as an office, all three of us. But velocity-based training, I think, is huge. And with the chains, it's been cool. You know, our rugby guys are just about to transition into season. They're starting the first week back in January. And we've taken a lot of those guys. You know, you have your forwards, again, they're that offensive lineman type body. They're big old guys. And when I program, you know, when I would regularly say 70%, dropping a 10% and adding a chain, right? My idea here, and I will do that for the entire team, actually. My idea here is if we're really hammering home the focus on bar speed on the way up and getting out of the hole, that transition time from going down to coming back up, minimizing that as much as possible. If that's every athlete's focus. If I have a guy, our chain sets are 5 pounds total. If I have a guy that's a 450-pound squat, what's the top? It's going to be right there on that 70%, right where it would have been. If he's more, then okay, it's going to be a little bit lighter than what we would program for him without chains. But that bar is going to be moving faster. Right now, we're really starting to train bar speed and you know, speed of muscle contraction there. So that's going to be really beneficial for him. How much stronger do I need him to be versus how much more explosive, how much more powerful? And every single coach you talk to is going to say, yeah, I don't necessarily need to be stronger. I need him to be more explosive. Okay, Roger, got that. So I think that's getting it done. And then at the same token, we have some of our smaller athletes who, let's say maybe that's a 300-pound back squat kid that all of a sudden that 10% drop, you know, when you start putting chains on there, that's going to be more than the 70% that we, quote unquote, would have programmed for him. But that's what he needs. You know, that kid just flat out needs to get stronger. That's a 18, 19-year-old that needs to get stronger. So, you know, it kind of handles that specialized training for me, you know, and that individualization, I think, is huge. And whether or not you might be able to hook our kids up to a bunch of meters and tell me that, hey, this actually isn't getting you any better, and that might be fine, but every single one of those dudes believes it, and that's 1A in my book. If they're bought in and they believe it and they're willing to come in and put out every single day, especially when they're not feeling like doing it, because they believe it's individualized for them and they're getting more out of it, then I think we're doing our job.
100%. Couldn't agree more there on that one. So, all right, Coach, this has been awesome. Let's wrap this up. 4 quick questions and a finisher. Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right. Favorite caffeine source?
Coffee.
Coffee,
no
man. Just black coffee?
Absolutely.
All right. Office snack. Favorite office snack?
You know, I do my own jerky.
Nice.
Got a dehydrator a little bit ago, so we'll go jerky quite a bit. That's kind of my go-to.
What's your favorite type of jerky? Is it deer jerky or?
I wish. No, I just do
beef.
beef.
Gotcha.
I haven't had. Yeah, if I can get venison or even shoot, you can get bison around here every once in a while. That's been huge. I had an intern actually she's from Alaska that brought me a bunch of moose.
Ooh.
That was the ticket. Tell you what.
That's awesome. That's a new one on the show, so I like that. All right.
Right.
You got 15 minutes to train yourself. What are you doing?
Deadlifting.
Nice. Are you doing dead Simba right
And
now? Are you
what's
doing
that?
dead Simba right now?
Oh no. I had one of my graduate assistants actually did the Squat-tober, so I got a front seat to watching that, and that was disgusting, and I refused. No, honestly, I deadlift because I hate it. So it's I can't stand doing it, so I force myself to do it. But yeah, 15 minutes, that's it. I'm all in on that.
All right, last one. Small school coach who's killing it deserves a shout out.
Chris Rice at Pacific Lutheran University. He was actually my strength coach my last 2 years there. He has done a ton with very, very little. He has taken the facility they have there and made it amazing. He's a mentor to me. He's one of those guys that anytime I have questions in this field that I'm calling him first. So he's been great. He's got a wealth of knowledge, both from running a facility and managing a ridiculous number of athletes in a very small shared space. So he's great.
Awesome. I might have to reach out to him. So, all right, Coach, this has been awesome. Again, really appreciate your time, and good luck. Have a good winter break, and good luck this upcoming spring. I hope everything goes all right for you, and we will put all Coach's contact info in the show notes, so please reach out to him with any questions. And once again, Coach, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.